But you know the real problem,
Kim, what's on your...
here in this country, according to Kim Iverson, is that the Department of Homeland Security has now labeled free speech domestic terrorism. I assume we're getting ready to hear some stupid shit. I think, look, fucking, what's this dude's name? Robbie is like laughing about what Kim's getting ready to say.
Your radar.
Well, this past Monday, the Department of Homeland Security released a bulletin titled Summary of Terrorism Threat to the U.S. Homeland. And what's in it is pretty shocking. It actually labels what is typically considered free speech as terrorism. So I want to go over this bulletin with you. So the bulletin starts off with, the United States remains in a heightened threat environment fueled by several factors, including an online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories and other forms of dis, and malinformation, MDM, introduced and or amplified by foreign and domestic threat actors. Okay, so first of all, remember, this is a bulletin about domestic terrorist threats to the homeland, and they're saying that we're in a heightened threat environment because of what they label MDM, dis, and malinformation.
Yes! What caused January the 6th? Literally misinformation about the election. Whipping people into a frenzy with misinformation about COVID. It's causing all kinds of incidents. Whipping people into a frenzy about critical race theory. Cause people to attack school boards and threaten doctors, as we saw in Tennessee. The fuck? I saw nothing wrong with the bulletin, which I have here in front of me.
Information, which they're saying could be spread by American citizens. So that's you and me. And if we spread what they label MDM, we could be in hot terrorism water. And when you click on it, you get their definition.
That's not at all what that said. That's not at all what it said. Because, like, number one on the bulletin here. Proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord and undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Number two, continued calls for violence directed at U.S. critical infrastructure.
Definition of what each one is says misinformation is false but not created or shared with the intent of causing harm. Malinformation is based on fact but used out of context to mislead, harm, or manipulate. Disinformation is deliberately created to mislead, harm, or manipulate a person, social group, organization, or country. Now, the problem with MDM being labeled as potential terrorist threats is that the definition of dis, and malinformation
this is leading to terrorist threats.
The pandemic, that many people who've been labeled as spreading misinformation or conspiracy theories have been, in fact, right all along. It was a conspiracy theory that there would be vaccine mandates. It was misinformation.
Yes, Ida, the dude that shot up the Walmart. Like, fucking, the guy that shot up Denver. Like, we haven't talked enough about that. I covered it here on the show. I bring it up in chats. All the right-wingers that platform that nut job, especially Zuby. I've been wanting to get into the Zuby phenomenon here on the show. So this is a fucking rapper. Had the dude that shot up Denver on his show just like a year or two ago. That guy was pumped full of misinformation. Breaking Points has gone nuts. And I wade into the comment section of that place. Like, it is, I get attacked all the time. It is far right lunacy. Yeah, how did The Hill put Ryan Grimm in one of the co-host seats? And it got worse. Oh, shit.
Security say people who spread MDM are possibly threat actors seeking to exacerbate societal friction to sow discord and undermine public trust in government institutions to encourage unrest, which could potentially inspire acts of violence. So they're saying if you sow discord and undermine public trust in a government institution like the CDC, FDA, the Pentagon.
Like, what? Free speech is terrorism. What it says on her chyron is completely wrong. Free speech now labeled as domestic terrorism by DHS. That is factually wrong. What you are saying is a lie. What you are saying is disinformation. And guess what? They aren't coming after you and calling you a terrorist.
Pentagon or Congress, that could lead to violence, which could happen to, let's say, during a protest. To prevent this, you could be labeled a terrorist threat if you're found to be engaging in speech that undermines a government institution that could lead to any of these acts. So if they think your words might lead to a protest against the government, and that protest might then lead to a violent breakout, which could happen at any protest, you could be labeled domestic terrorist simply for dissenting. By issuing this bulletin, they've effectively given themselves...
I don't see that anywhere in this bulletin.
...they don't like under the guise of it could lead to violence. They're saying it's a domestic terrorist threat, and we can't have that. And I think many of us warned this was on the horizon when politicians and others in the media were calling for more to be done against misinformation. I think some of us were mocked for saying the definition of terrorism is changing, and the end result will be our own government going after anyone and everyone they deem to be morally inferior. Yet here we are.
Fucking the U.S. government has used terrorism as a guise to go after people for fucking 20 years now. Where you been, Kim? I clipped this for YouTube. That might have to be the picture I use.
We are. The bulletin goes on to say, the convergence of the following factors has increased the volatility, unpredictability, and complexity of the threat environment. The proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Again, you're putting yourself in the crosshairs if you sow discord or undermine public trust in government institutions. Don't talk bad about the government. It goes on to say, the primary terrorism-related threat to the United States continues to stem from lone offenders or small cells of individuals who are motivated by a range of foreign and or domestic grievances, often cultivated through the consumption of certain online content. So
yes.
It could just be you. You don't need to be affiliated with a known neo-Nazi group or some other flagged organization. If you, acting alone, air grievances against the government that they deem to be potentially threatening, you could be flagged as a domestic terrorist. The bulletin continues, for example, there is widespread online proliferation of false or misleading narratives regarding unsubstantiated widespread election fraud and COVID-19 grievances associated with these themes, inspired violent extremist attacks during 2021.
Yes. Yes, they did.
Measures, particularly COVID-19 vaccine and mask mandates, have been used by domestic violent extremists to justify violence since 2020 and could continue to inspire these extremists to target government healthcare and academic institutions that they associate with those measures. Now, I understand that they're talking probably about January.
There was a neo-Nazi group that was outside of a hospital. It can fucking... You see, I'm going to let her play, and I'll see if I can find the story.
Angry parents at school board meetings and angry airline passengers. I don't remember there being any violent extremist attacks due to COVID, unless they're talking about the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping.
Bullshit!
Bullshit! By the FBI. Of course, it goes on.
No, that's not true. Like, multiple people have now pled guilty. It wasn't planned by the FBI. And here, Kim, I thought you were a journalist. I thought you were a fucking journalist. Neo-Nazis target anti-racist doctors at Brigham and Women's Hospital, calling them anti-white. This was 8 days ago. 8 days ago on Saturday, January 22nd. This was published 8 days ago. About 24 white nationalists dressed in identical beige khaki pants and dark hoodies protested in front of Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, holding a bed sheet with black lettering reading B&W Hospital kills whites. Oh, but hey, Kim doesn't know what they're talking about.
On to say, malign foreign powers have and continue to amplify these false or misleading narratives.
Rada, welcome. Thank you for being a freaking follower.
See, all of this mis, dis, and malinformation is really being supported and spread by probably Russia. So if you're an angry American spreading COVID disinformation online, you're most likely a Russian asset. And that makes you dangerous to our national security. Lastly, and what needs to be pointed out, is it goes on to say, DHS is working with public and private sector partners, as well as foreign counterparts, to identify and evaluate MDM.
I really don't like her.
Misleading narratives and conspiracy theories spread on social media and other online platforms that endorse or could inspire violence. Now, what gets me here is the Department of Homeland Security is saying they are working with not only the public sector, but the private sector as well. So that leads me to believe that they're working with big tech companies to censor whatever.
Where you been? Where you been? You want to get rid of the NSA? Because I sure as fuck do.
Now, who gets to decide on this? You know, Ryan and Robbie, they say that they're going to be, working with the private sector and the public sector in stopping the spread of misinformation. Who are they to decide? They don't have exactly the best track record on deciding what is dis, or conspiracy theory information. Yet, this bulletin is pretty, I think, alarming.
Kimmy Dore.
Basically saying that speech, dissent from the government.
Moxicito, you win the internet tonight. Kimmy Dore.
Against a government institution is potentially domestic terrorism.
Yeah, I think that the Homeland Security Department was a mistake.
Yeah, I was just going to say we should. I have the answer. Shut it down.
Yeah,
disband.
I'm totally down with that. We can all agree on that shit.
Probably, they probably don't like the abolish ICE language. They probably think that's misinformation. They should add to that alternative information as something that they condemn, so that they can then make it MDMA, and we can all at least chuckle at this bureaucratic creeping fascism that they're pushing.
DHS very high on list of government agencies I will eliminate.
Yeah.
Very high.
That's never the one Republicans throw out. They're always like the EPA, the Department of Education.
Most of it was on mis, dis, and malinformation, but they did add in things that were genuine domestic terrorist threats. They would talk about violent attacks against synagogues or churches or other places, but that was kind of intermixed in between. Most of it was about mis, dis, and malinformation, and then they'd put in real
as the causes.
Threats that I think any of us would consider a problem, anybody that's calling for violence. But they classified all of the, and then they also said, oh, and by the way, we created a separate branch too, just so you know, to specifically go after these types of domestic terrorist threats.
Yeah.
And that's on top of the Department of Justice also creating, quietly last month, I think it was January 11th, they released this notice saying that they had created their own also department of, to go after domestic terrorists. So we're seeing these new branches, and it's all targeting misinformation.
I bet there are going to be a lot more kidnapping plots against Democratic governors. They're just going to multiply, so we find out that the FBI is the ones behind them. Look, law enforcement has every...
The FBI was not behind the
to pursue
plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer.
To stop.
I wish Ryan would correct that.
For violent plots, for engaging in violence. The whole domestic terrorism framing is very prone to abuse and not necessary outside maybe the category of actual sort of terrorist attacks being planned inside the country that are actually linked to foreign group like ISIS or something. But even those were always deranged people who want to do something because they're interested in ISIS, but not that ISIS actually had any formal connection it's copycat type things. So it's really not a useful label. And more than not being a useful label, it's one that now the government wants to apply to anyone who is critical of the government or things that it says, right, left, etc. So
Can I get an example of this happening?
There's enough crime for the FBI to try to go after without trying to invent stuff and start editing people's posts.
Yeah.
Once they've cracked down.
I'm down with getting rid of the FBI, the CIA.
Talk to us.
Fuck law enforcement in general.
Wall Street crime spree underway. Go deal with that. Solve that. Then we'll talk about expanding your mandate to Twitter posts.
Yeah. Maybe if those Wall Street criminals are unmasked and unvaccinated, then they'll really want.
No, they're vaccinated.
Yeah, then they'll go after them. Well, and also one thing in the bulletin, I was looking for, as they were bringing up examples of like COVID misinformation and
Kind of sounded like it, Flash.
fraud, and then they also brought up, of course, the actual violent attacks against synagogues and whatnot. I was looking in the bulletin for any sort of example the other way, like they could say, the taking over, the occupying of downtown Seattle, or any sort of.
Oh my God!
They didn't mention any of that. I mean, this was clearly a one-sided, going after one political way of thinking, and that, is pretty frightening.
Going after one way, fuck, as if the state wasn't like snatching up BLM protesters in black vans. And fucking Kim probably didn't give a shit. Rising is the morning show on the Hill TV. Used to be hosted by Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball. I fucking can't stand Sagar and Jetty. That's one of my goals in life, is to eventually be able to be big enough to debate Sagar and Jetty. Or Spike Cohen, either or. Billy Crystal. I wish it would be a lot more entertaining if it was Billy Crystal.